Yahoo Finance's Emily McCormick joins us now for a look ahead at what to expect in this week. Emily.
Well, Miles, as you mentioned, this week is going to be packed with new economic data tracking how the recovery really evolved in June. And the headliner is going to be that June jobs report out on Friday, and that is likely to show more improvement in terms of both job gains and the unemployment rate. So consensus is looking for non-farm payrolls to have grown by 700,000 for the biggest rise since March. The unemployment rate is expected to move down to 5.7% from 5.8% in May, and that would bring the jobless rate closer to its pre-pandemic 50-year low of 3.5%. Now, how fast the economy is ultimately able to fill the labor deficit caused by the pandemic, which is still at more than 7 million payrolls, and also alleviate some of these labor supply shortages that we've been hearing about in companies across industries. Those are ultimately going to be the two big questions as we head into this report. And of course, we are also going to be getting the ADP private payrolls report, as well as another weekly jobless claims report out on Thursday as well. So a busy week in terms of the labor market recovery. Now, a couple other key reports are also going to be coming out this week. We have Thursday's ISM manufacturing report. That's likely to show a slight deceleration in the pace of expansion in the manufacturing sector, with some of these supply chain shortages and labor supply challenges still weighing on growth in goods-producing industries. Now, we'll also be getting some new housing data in the form of the S&P CoreLogic Case-Shiller Home Price Index. And in terms of the housing market, we have been seeing home prices holding near two-decade highs over the past couple months, again, due to high demand and tight inventory. And those dynamics are still likely to show in these latest pricing reports. And then finally, we will also be getting data from the consumer perspective on all of this in the form of the Conference Board's Consumer Sentiment Index on Tuesday. So that's out tomorrow morning. And that is likely to show a jump back to the highest level since February 2020 for June. The assumption there really being that consumers, like many investors, will have warmed to this idea that the recovery will continue on the economic side, that inflation may end up being transitory, and so their real spending power won't necessarily be hampered over the longer term. But all this to say, definitely a lot for investors to be keeping an eye on for this week, guys.
And Emily, just thinking a little bit more about that jobs report that we're getting on Friday, we've now seen estimates kind of normalize, let's call it around that 750,000 number, as you outlined. But it wasn't so long ago, right, that you and I were both going through notes where it said, oh, it's going to be several million per month, no big deal through the summer. And it does seem that economists have really toned down their expectations on how quickly the hiring that is needed in the economy can actually happen. There seems to be an acceptance maybe of some of the frictions that we have in the labor market.
No, you're absolutely right, Miles. And I think that's something we've been seeing, especially as we look at some of the other labor market data, like the JOLTS jobs report for April. That's the latest data point that we have showing a record high number of job openings. We're still seeing those quit rates and layoffs really showing, again, a little bit of a tendency towards workers not necessarily being able to go back to the workforce in the numbers that are needed to make up some of these shortages in the near term. But, we've been hearing companies from FedEx, for example, which just had its earnings, talking about their difficulties in bringing back enough delivery workers, how that's impacted some of the routes that they've had to use for their package deliveries. And I think this is something that really is weighing on this recovery. We're seeing that coming up in the IHS market PMIs last week. We'll likely see that again play out in the ISM report this week. But like you said, we're not necessarily seeing the job gains that we had in March. We had those downward revisions to the past couple months of payrolls data. And I think economists are now finally getting the calculus more in line with the actuals when it comes to what this recovery is going to look like. It is going to take some time. And that's something that the Fed has acknowledged as well, that this may be drawn out, but we are still moving in the right direction. Miles.
All right, Yahoo Finance's Emily McCormick with a preview of the week's data ahead. Emily, I know we'll check in with you as this data rolls